Hi, I'm Jeff from the Nationwide Super Team, and welcome to our latest Small Business Super Business Newsreel. Well, what a year 2020 has turned out to be, with the coronavirus pandemic causing all sorts of upheaval and resulting in a new normal, at least until a vaccine becomes readily available. In this update, we're going to recap our response to the pandemic to date and cover the highlights from the recent federal budget. Looking at the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a rocky few months in March and April that saw significant volatility in share markets. During that time, members were looking to us for information on their super savings. We communicated regularly with our members and you, our employers, via email during that period, providing almost daily market commentary through the volatile early months of March and April, and creating a new section on our website with a range of resources and information. Our key message was that super is a long-term investment, and periods of negative returns and volatility are just to be expected. The right thing for everyone to do was not panic, and for most people, the next thing to do was nothing. And as we've seen already, markets have rebounded strongly since those lows in March and April. The investors who get themselves into trouble in times like these are those that try to time the market or make impulsive, panic decisions, switching investment options and potentially locking in negative returns, instead of riding out the wave of volatility and keeping their eye on their long-term goals. In terms of the government's response and the early access to super allowance for eligible members of up to $10,000, the impact on us has been minimal, with about 1.5% of total funds withdrawn. Our focus has been on educating members about the long-term impacts of taking money out of your super early and helping them with strategies to get back on track with extra contributions and things like that. From your employer perspective, there was some confusion early on about the $1,500 JobKeeper payment and whether the superannuation guarantee was going to be payable. The government did eventually confirm that SG would continue to be payable on the worker's salary for their ordinary hours. It would only be different in the situation where an employee would otherwise be earning less than $1,500 a fortnight. Let's say $1,000, for example, and the employer chose to pay them the extra $500 in order to qualify for the JobKeeper reimbursement. The SG would only be payable on the $1,000, not the additional $500 amount. Overall, while we wait to see the longer-term economic impacts of the pandemic and any future events like further waves of infections until an effective vaccine becomes widely available, as a fund, we're managing fine, and we continue to be on hand for our members if they need our help. The federal budget delivered in early October was focused on kickstarting the economy in the face of the pandemic, and also proposed some important changes to super and retirement legislation. The 4 key measures announced are largely building on existing reforms and have been positioned as reducing wastage in the system. These are just proposed measures. They haven't been finalised, and there's nothing you need to do at this point. We'll be in touch with you if there's any impacts to your administration processes down the track. The first measure is referred to as the stapling of accounts, which in essence just means they're proposing to put a process in place for a member's super account to follow them when they change jobs, instead of potentially starting a new account each time. Now, while the benefits of not having multiple accounts and associated fees are straightforward for members, we'll be keeping an eye on the details to check whether there ends up being any extra administration burden passed on to you as the employer. The second measure relates to member choice and an interactive Your Super comparison tool the government is proposing to launch, which will help members decide which super fund best suits their needs. The tool will compare My Super arrangements ranked on fees and investments, provide links to fund websites, and prompt users to consider consolidating their accounts. Similar comparison websites already exist, and the big issue will be how the rankings and comparisons will be prepared or what basis will be used. A lot of funds have special arrangements like employer fund fee discounts, bespoke insurance arrangements, or additional member services. It'll be interesting to see the detail behind the tool and how close it will actually get to comparing apples with apples. Stay tuned for that. The third measure is aimed at holding underperforming funds to account. Under this proposal, by 1 July 2021, My Super products will be subject to an annual performance test. Funds deemed to be underperforming will have to inform its members of the underperformance and include references to the Your Super tool I mentioned before. Funds that fail 2 consecutive annual underperformance tests will not be permitted to accept new members unless their performance improves. The budget papers didn't include much detail on this measure, And again, it will be interesting to see what will constitute underperformance and ultimately whether the measure will achieve its intended outcomes. The fourth measure relates to the trustees of superannuation funds and is aimed at increasing their accountability and transparency. These measures appear to be building on the member outcomes package that super trustees have been implementing over recent years anyway. The only other thing to note was that the budget did not announce any change to the scheduled superannuation guarantee increases. The SG is scheduled to increase by 0.5% of ordinary time earnings each year from 1 July 2021, from the current 9.5% up to 12% from 1 July 2025. The increase has been delayed previously, and the Prime Minister has stated there hasn't been a decision made. So the door is open for this to change before the first increase next year. Well, that's it for this Small Business Super Business Newsreel. See you next time.